Well, as you can see from the beginning of this episode, we are back out in the shop with another Shop Talk Tuesday build series where we are working on a knife. Now, in this series, we are going to be turning this piece of 5160 leaf spring material into a kukri. Now, at the beginning of this episode, you saw me taking the leaf spring and taking that curve out of it and then flattening it, and then taking that taper that's built into this style of leaf spring, that taper, and centering it so that we have a nice distal taper on here, getting that all situated and straight. So we got that done. Now, would it have been awesome to forge this a profile? Yes, it would have, but having the forge outside in the elements and having 25-mile-per-hour wind blowing over the Venturi burner is not optimal. Basically, the forge likes to sputter and things like that, and there's not much that I can do. I can't just build a temporary shop while I'm building an actual shop to try and fight that. So I just had to work with what I had, and we were able to get it forged flat, centered up, and everything like that. The rest of this is going to be stock removal. So the goal for this is to end up making this knife right here. So this is going to be a 12.5-inch overall length kukri. It's going to have about a 7.5-inch blade. It's going to have a distal taper all the way down the spine and everything. It's going to look really cool. And the handle profile is going to be profiled in one of the ways that I actually saw at blade shows. So whenever we get to the handle part of this series in a couple of weeks, you'll actually see me do a handle profile like a few of the ones that I saw at Blade Show, and I'll get into that more in detail whenever we actually get to that point so that you can see kind of what I learned from holding all the different knives at the show. And I'll explain all that, like I said, when we get there. What we need to do now is we need to go ahead and cut this profile out with the porta band saw and then get it ground and refined so that this thing actually starts looking like a knife. That's the goal for this episode. So one of the things that I did to make this steel really easy to work with was I annealed it whenever I had the forge going. So basically just brought it up to non-magnetic, let it cool down really, really slow, and that takes the hardness out of it. That's why I was able to cut through it, and it'll make it easier to drill the pinholes, plus it's less rough on my abrasives. Now, this is an incinerator belt, and this bad boy is amazing. Absolutely love these. I've got a bunch of them, and they just eat through steel. You know, Absolutely love them. I would suggest you get some of these. This is 36 grit. So one of the things that you're probably not hearing right now is the machine not bogging down like it typically does when I go to remove a bunch of material. So my machine, this KMG belt grinder, this 2x72 by Beaumont Metalworks, it is belt driven back here. So it's the motor, pulleys with the belt, and then it goes over to the main drive wheel. You lose a lot of torque in that, but my issue that I had this whole entire time, and I don't know why I didn't think about doing it, my belt wasn't tight enough. So I was losing a ton of power by not having the belt tightened. So I loosened up the bolts on the base here, shifted it, tightened that belt, and now it just eats through steel. When it comes to the swedge right here, I'm just going to grind down to this line right here. Basically, I'm just going to match it up to where the spine comes into the swoop up for the swedge. We're going to grind an even bevel all the way down to the tip. So the same gap from here to here will be from here to here. Grind that in, and then we'll bring the bevels up to it. And what will end up happening is where this bevel comes all the way down to the tip here, it will end up getting brought up as we start bringing these bevels up. It'll bring this bevel that comes down from the swedge, it'll start bringing that up to where it'll meet the actual tip itself. So that's how it's going to counteract each other. And I like to do the swedge first and then bring the bevels up. That way I can kind of modulate it and play with it until it meets perfectly at that tip. So we got a nice even bevel all the way down. We're following this line all the way down. Now I didn't bring it all the way to it. We've got a little bit more that we can go because I want to finish grinding that after the heat treat. And we'll bring it down, and then whenever we get done hand sanding and all that, everything will line up nice and where it needs to be. So now we just need to replicate this to the other side and then put our plunge line jig on, start grinding our bells. So now that we have the plunge line jig on here, it's time to go ahead and start grinding our bevels. Now, when it comes to how I have the plunge line jig set up, and for one, this is a very easy, simple plunge line jig to make if you want to make one. I've got a video on this. I'll leave it in the description below. This is just all stainless steel parts that you can get from Lowe's to make it, but we've got it positioned a hair forward from where my plunge line is going to end up. So the whole point behind that is we're going to cut in the bevels, and then by hand I'm going to grind and round that plunge line and let it kind of flow into the blade. So we're going to grind in the bevels, leave it a little bit forward, and then smooth it back. But for right now we need to grind in about a 45-degree angle, just a steeper angle with a used incinerator belt. And then once we get that angle in, we're going to go ahead, switch it to a new belt, and grind in those bevels the rest of the way. The whole point behind using a used one of these is it's pretty rough on the belt to grind in that 45 and cut that edge. So we're going to use this one and then switch to a newer one. So one of the nice things about grinding in this initial bevel is what it's going to end up doing is it's going to define that cutting edge. So all I'm doing is getting down to that scribed line on here, and then I'm going to go and grind this line and grind it down all the way to that scribed line, and then from that point forward I don't need to make the edge any thinner than that. So all I'm doing from that point forward is taking and bringing the bevel up, but I'm not grinding any thinner. I'm not putting any more pressure towards the cutting edge at that point. All the pressure is gradually going to be going towards the spine, just to bring that bevel up higher and higher and higher and higher until we get to where we want to be on this. So we define that cutting edge, and it's not going to get any thinner than that until after heat treat. So now I'm going to switch, do the other side, and then we're going to start working on bringing these bevels up. So now that we have a brand new 36 grit incinerator belt on here, we want to go ahead and grind in our main bevels here. So one of the things to know about how I grind these, for one, I've got about a 1/16 of an inch of this belt hanging off the platen on this side over here. It's only about a 1/16. It's just enough to make sure that it's not overhanging, like to where I don't have space showing like this, because if this belt isn't all the way over and slightly over, you won't get that crisp plunge line. You won't get it, it doesn't suck up into a plunge line jig like this. You'd have a weird gap, and then trying to replicate that to the other side, it might not line up right. We want it to be the same on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this in with that 1/16 hanging over here, and then I'm going to switch to the other side, hang that 1/16 off on this side. Everything should be good. Now when it comes time to grinding these bevels, I'm going to come in, and at the beginning I'm going to kind of pull back like this. So we're going to go in a little bit and then pull back just to kind of get those bevels going. But because I'm not following this, because I'm making the line where the bevels meet the flats to where it's just a nice curve, as soon as I bring these bevels up to about halfway, we're going to switch from pulling like this to just pulling straight across. and we're going to treat it like a regular knife. So once we set the bevels and we get them nice and flowing, we're going to take that curve out and we're going to make it a nice swoop line going up to the tip. So you'll see that, and what's going to end up happening is we're going to be pulling across, and as I'm coming from here, I will basically push more pressure towards this big bulky area than I would here. So this area might only have a little bit of an angle, but as we come forward, I'm going to push more, and it's going to be, you know, closer to the belt here. So shallow to deep, and that's going to bring this line that kind of curves like this up and come across, and you'll see that as we start doing this. Alright guys, let's go ahead and wrap this Shop Talk Tuesday up with some of this. I really like the way that this profile is looking. It is super comfortable in the hand, and I feel like it's just forward enough, has just enough curve to not be ridiculous, but still look good. Now, one of the things that I am going to end up changing on this, and you'll see it in the next episode, is the plunge line. I still don't like exactly where it's at. I don't think that a knife with this much curviness needs this sharp plunge line. I want to round it just a little bit up into here. I don't really like that straight line or this little sharp angle that's right here. I want to round it back in, and I kind of want to bring the plunge all the way back to this corner right here instead of having it further up here. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and we're just going to make it swoop back a little bit more. I'm probably going to have to do that by hand with like files. If I can end up doing it on the belts, I will. Either way I go, you're going to see what it looks like and how I did it in the next video. So other than that, I kind of want to explain a couple of lines that I have on here. So you saw that I did the pins and all that, but I've got two other lines going on right here. What's going to end up happening is whenever we get into the handle part of this, I plan on doing a copper layer liner. It's not just going to be a liner, it's actually going to be an exposed layer towards the front. So where the further line comes up right here, there's going to be copper exposed from the scales to the front. So we're going to have a layer of copper, and then on top of that they're going to have the scales, and that layer of copper is going to be textured, so you're going to see it transition from the scales down into the copper and then down into the ricasso. And I think it's going to look pretty cool. At least I hope it does. We're going to see how that goes, but I kind of want to elevate this build and do a couple of things that I've seen at Blade Show and online and stuff like that, and try that out just to kind of elevate the knife, not go so far that it's just unrealistic and an unusable knife, but just enough to elevate it while still making it really nice. And in the next episode, we're going to go ahead and we're going to heat treat it. We're going to put the finish that's going to be on it pre-handle, and I think y'all are going to like it. We're going to see how that goes. You know me, I'm going to do something that might not make sense for a kukri, but I think it'll look good, especially with contrast and things like that with the copper and the handle and everything. So that's what y'all have to look forward to in the next episode: heat treating, finishing the blade, getting it ready for handle scales. Guys, if y'all would give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there, and I'll catch y'all next time.